It's October 28th, 2023. This is Political Dharma, and I am Alan Zundel. Today, I'm returning to the topic of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his chances of winning the presidency in next year's election. In two previous episodes, I've indicated that I think it's very unlikely he could win the election due to the Electoral College. But having identified that as the chief obstacle, this last week I've been thinking, knowing what the obstacle is, let's do a thought experiment and see if there are ways that he could get around that or ways that he could approach it strategically in order to increase his chances of winning. And I have to tell you, the results of my thought experiment were not too encouraging for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Just seemed harder the closer I looked at it. But I'm not going to end the show on a sour note like that, at least for those who are supporters of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or interested in seeing him do well. I'm going to talk about why in these days, even my predictions, as sound as they are, may not hold water, that things could be very different than we think, and that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. could end up president. So that's where I'm headed today. Before I get into that, brief note on my own political activism that I give you updates on from time to time. First, I had been involved in an effort to reform the internal organization of the Pacific Green Party here in Oregon. The Green Party in Oregon is the Pacific Green Party. It's affiliated with the National Green Party of the United States. But after Cornel West defected from seeking the nomination of the Green Party, there was a big loss of interest within the organization, at least as I perceive it, and proceeding with internal reorganization seems to have been set on a back burner and not a lot of energy around it. So I don't think I'm going to be pursuing that. Also because I don't think there's a lot of chance of a lot of new members joining now that Cornel is not running for the Green Party nomination. That's one thing. So that's kind of on a down note. On the upper note, I've been involved in a campaign to bring star voting to Eugene, Oregon, the city council and mayor election, and also like a utility election, I think, for our electric company. We did get enough signatures to put it on the ballot. It will be on the ballot in May of 2024. So we may get star voting passed and implemented in a city for the first time in U.S. history. Star voting is, of course, a relatively new idea, which is meant to be an improvement on ranked choice voting, which has getting a lot of space in the news lately. But let's turn to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his chances for winning the presidency. As I've said, the problem is the Electoral College. Now, if you remember, the president and vice president are not elected directly by us voters casting our ballots. They are indirectly elected through the mediation of the Electoral College, which I talked a little bit about last week as well. In the Electoral College system, which is set up by the United States Constitution, each state in the United States gets a certain number of Electoral College votes based on the number of senators and representatives in Congress that come from the state. Also, the District of Columbia, where the White House and the capital, the national capital, reside, District of Columbia gets 3 Electoral College votes. In almost all cases, states give all of their electoral votes to the candidate who received the most popular votes in that state. Maine and Nebraska are the 2 exceptions to this rule, but they're not that much different from the other states, so it's not going to affect our argument, and we'll just ignore them for now. There are 538 Electoral College votes in all, and to win, a candidate needs a majority of those, not just the most Electoral College votes, but more than half, which would be at least 270 Electoral College votes. To make my following argument a little bit easier, let's simplify the picture by assuming that the United States, for some reason, has shrunken down to just 3 states, and we'll call this the miniature United States or the miniature USA. Those states would be Washington, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. Washington has 12 Electoral College votes, Tennessee has 11 Electoral College votes, and Wisconsin has 10 Electoral College votes. So they're fairly evenly matched. I chose these states because one of them, Washington, is a blue state, which tends to vote heavily Democratic. Tennessee is a red state, which tends to vote heavily Republican. and Wisconsin is a swing state where voters are nearly evenly split between the two major parties in big elections. In this miniature USA, there's a total of 33 electoral votes, and because a candidate needs a majority win, they need at least 17 of those votes. Suppose RFK Jr. does real well in 2024, attracting voters from both sides of the political spectrum, which is really not just left and right, but has a lot of people in various positions, say young people of various political leanings. All are attracted to his strong and long record of protecting the environment. Maybe MAGA Republicans will be sympathetic with his vaccine skepticism. Maybe Democrats still associate the Kennedy brand with the idealism of his father and his uncle back in the 1960s. Maybe a lot of independent voters and voters who only loosely lean toward one of the major parties. Maybe they affiliate with a major party, but are willing to consider the other party, or just, loosely attached to the party. Maybe independents and those kind of loosely attached voters are sick enough of the current situation that they will give a sympathetic hearing to a candidate who promises to clean up the corporate influence over our national government. That is, in some way, restrict the influence of corporate donations and corporate lobbyists. So if he's able to pull together a coalition like that, along with a number of other people who see that he may be going up in the polls, maybe he could, let's say, that in our mini USA 2024 election, he's able to pull 17 percentage points away from each of the two major party candidates in our red state of Tennessee and our blue state of Washington. In the 2020 election in Washington state, Biden got 58% of the vote and Trump got 38.8% of the vote, with all the other candidates combined getting 3.3%. So if in 2024, RFK takes 17 points away from Biden's 58%, that leaves Biden with 41%. 58 minus 17 is 41. And if RFK takes 17 percentage points away from Trump, Trump is left with 21.8 percentage points. That is 38.8% minus 17. And since RFK receives 17 percentage points from each of them, he gets a total of 34%. We can make the same kind of calculations for Tennessee. RFK takes 17 points from Trump's 60.7% and 17 points from Biden's 37.5%, again giving RFK 34% of the vote in Tennessee as well as in Washington. By the way, 34% of the vote is very high by historical standards. The last time somebody got even close to that was Ross Perot in the 1992 election. The highest he got in any state was in Maine. He got 30.44% of the vote. So that's close to the 34% that I'm positing for RFK in 2024. But in all the other states, Perot did considerably less well. He was in the 20s and in some cases in the single digits in a lot of states. But he did get close to 30 and over in some of the states. So maybe it's possible for RFK to do the same. Let's say in Wisconsin, the swing state, RFK does almost as well, but instead of giving 17 percentage points from each major party candidate, he gets 16 percentage points from each of the two major party candidates. And I'll explain later why I'm making that assumption. So even that, taking 16 percentage points would be really good from a historical perspective. But let's go forward. So in Wisconsin, RFK takes 16 percentage points from Biden's 49.5 and 16 points from Trump's 48.8%. And the results for the three states would look like this. In Washington, Biden gets 41% of the vote, Trump gets 21.8% of the vote, and RFK gets 34% of the vote. In Tennessee, Biden gets 20.5% of the vote, Trump 43.7%, and RFK, again, 34%. And finally, in Wisconsin, our swing state, Biden gets 33.5%, Trump 32.8%, and RFK 32%. So in Washington, which on the screen, if you're watching this in the video, is the first column, Biden wins because his 41% share of the vote is more than Trump's 28 21.8%, or Kennedy's 34%. I made the characters in that column turn blue to show a win for the Democratic candidate. Biden thus gets all 12 of Washington's Electoral College votes. In Tennessee, Trump got the most votes at 43.7%, and he gets all 11 of Tennessee's Electoral College votes. And finally, in Wisconsin, Biden wins again because he got the most votes there as well, 33.5% as compared to 32.8% for Trump and 32% for RFK. So Biden gets Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes as well, giving him 22 altogether. That is 12 from Washington and 10 from Wisconsin, which is more than half of all the Electoral College votes in our miniature USA, and makes him the winner of the Electoral College vote. So Biden becomes president under that scenario. But note that RFK got 0 electoral votes, even though he did well enough to come in second in Washington and Tennessee, and was extremely close to Biden and Trump's results in Wisconsin. Again, for historical comparison, in this case, Kennedy would still be doing better than Perot in 92, who only came in second place in one state, which was Alaska, getting 30.44% of the vote to George Bush's 30.39% of the vote. So a very small fraction brought him into second place in Alaska. In that state, Bill Clinton got 38.77%, not too much farther ahead, but that meant that Clinton won the state's Electoral College votes. And I want to point out one more thing before I move on. If we look at the popular vote, that is how the voters voted instead of the Electoral College vote, the results are very different. If we combine all the voters across all 3 of our states in the mini United States, a total of 10,438,834 people voted. We look at the fraction of the vote that each of the candidates got across all 3 states. Kennedy got the most votes at 3,483,257 compared to 3,406,581 for Biden and 3,307,168 for Trump. In percentage terms, that's 33.4% for Kennedy, 32.6% for Biden, and 31.7% for Trump. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was the winner in the popular vote in our mock election of 2024 for our 3-state United States, even though he didn't receive a single Electoral College vote. Perot didn't win a single Electoral College vote, but he wasn't the winner of the popular vote either. He just came up to like 19% or so, which is a far cry from even getting a third of the votes. So even though in our example, Kennedy did much better than Perot and became the popular vote winner, he still didn't win a single Electoral College vote. Wait a minute, you say? Didn't I rig the results in Wisconsin by saying that Kennedy only got 16 percentage points from each candidate rather than 17 percentage points from each candidate, as I assumed he did in Washington and Tennessee? So let's do that. Let's take the 17 percentage points away from each major party candidate in Wisconsin as well and give them to Kennedy and see how it comes out. In our original count, RFK got 32% in Wisconsin behind Biden's 33.5% and Trump's 32.8%. But take away 1 percentage point from Biden and 1 from Trump and give the 2 percentage points to RFK. And suddenly RFK is ahead with 34% to Biden's 32.5% and Trump's 31.8%. He would have received Wisconsin's 10 electoral votes instead of Biden getting them, preventing Biden from getting a majority of the Electoral College votes overall. That gives us a clue as to what Kennedy should do in order to try to win the Electoral College votes. He should focus his attention on swing states and states that are very competitive instead of on states that are deep blue or deep red. At least that's the way it looks going in. And the reason for that is that in the deep blue and red states, the major party candidate who's favored in that state is going to be further ahead of the second choice. So it's going to be harder to overtake that candidate and pull ahead of them. Now, there's a reason why both Kennedy was able to flip Wisconsin in our example, and Perot was able to come so close to Clinton and Bush in 92 in Alaska, and that is because those were competitive states, right? The margin of difference between the major party candidates was so small that it was easier for a third party candidate to get very close or overtake them in the case of our hypothetical example. So in states where the front runner is going to be very far ahead, it's harder to get ahead. So Kennedy, at least according to this insight, would do well to focus on states that are more competitive, right? But it's not impossible for a third party candidate to win some electoral college votes. This happened in 1912 when former Republican President Teddy Roosevelt ran as the candidate of the Progressive Party against incumbent Republican President William Howard Taft and Democrat Woodrow Wilson. All three candidates got some electoral college votes, but Roosevelt and Taft ended up splitting the Republican vote, allowing Wilson to get a majority of the electoral college votes and win the election. So what happens in our miniature USA election if Kennedy is able to swing one of the states and win the electoral college vote in that particular state? If Kennedy won in Wisconsin, Biden would only have his 12 electoral college votes from Washington. Trump would still have 11 electoral college votes from Tennessee, and Kennedy would have 10 electoral college votes from Wisconsin. But unlike in 1912, none of them would have a majority of the electoral college votes that they would need. And according to U.S. Constitution, if there's no majority winner, remember a majority is more than half, the decision then goes to the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, each state gets one vote, and the congressional delegation from that state would vote among themselves as to how they're going to cast their state's vote. And then all those single state votes added up then would determine the outcome of the presidential election. Now, it sounds kind of complicated. It's not really that complicated. But the important point here is that because you have congressional people in Congress voting, the most likely scenario is that Republican Congress people are going to vote for the Republican candidate, and Democratic congressional people are going to vote for the Democratic candidate. And very few, if any, are going to vote for Kennedy in their hypothetical examples. So Kennedy doesn't seem to have a chance if things go to the House of Representatives. So he needs to focus not on only winning some states, but on winning so many states that he can get a majority in the Electoral College vote and prevent the vote from going to the House of Representatives, where he's very, very likely to lose. I said that Kennedy should target the states that are the most competitive between the two major parties, so let's start with those. A map from the website 270towin.com shows how competitive each state is expected to be in 2024. The tan-colored states are swing states. The light blue and pink states are more competitive than the dark blue and red states. All of the tan states add up to 62 electoral college votes. So if Kennedy's able to win in all the swing states, he can get 62 electoral college votes. You can see this in the bar above the map of the U.S. if you're watching this episode as a video. So the bar on the top shows the number of electoral college votes available in each of the types of states. If you add the light blue and light pink states to Kennedy's total, he gets another 37 electoral college votes, giving him a total of 99. Still a long way to go from the 270 he's going to need in 2024. The slightly bluer and redder states add up to another 127, giving Kennedy a total of 226. Still not enough. So he would need some votes for the some of the dark blue or dark red states, or maybe a big dark blue state like California, in order to reach the 270 electoral college votes that he would need to win. So you can see now why I think it is very unlikely that Kennedy can win in 2024. He would practically have to sweep the map to get enough electoral college votes to get a majority. And that's because with three viable candidates running, they're probably going to split them between them. If he runs well, it'll go to the House of Representatives. So he needs to pretty much sweep the map and gets a majority of electoral college votes to avoid throwing the vote to the electoral college, throwing it to the House of Representatives. But I keep a couple things in mind here, and this is where I give a caveat to my predictions. Okay, so what I'm saying is that if things work the way they usually do, even if Kennedy does really well and putting out a coalition that polls support that would otherwise go to one of the two major party candidates, he's going to have a hard time getting by the Electoral College. But we are not living through an era of relative stability in political behaviors, right? We can see a lot of breaking of norms and traditions in the recent years. And I think there's multiple reasons why that's happening, primarily because our economic and world situation is so shaky. People are very nervous, and they're looking at how things, how the government's not really addressing problems adequately, and they're feeling like something's seriously wrong. People come to different conclusions about what that is. But what I'm saying is that things could turn out very different. For one thing, party loyalty is breaking down. We recently had in the House of Representatives, the Republican majority was trying to elect the new Speaker of the House, and they went through 4 candidates before they found one, and nobody knows whether this candidate's going to last very long in that position either. What this week-long episode demonstrated was deep divisions within the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives. And I think that reflects deep divisions within the party across the board in the United States, including their voters. So you may have a lot of defections from the candidate, whether the candidate is Trump or possibly some other candidate, if Trump gets in enough legal trouble to deter people from voting for him in the primaries. So in other words, Republican Party could split up in a lot of ways that are unpredictable, and their voters may go to a different candidate, like perhaps Kennedy. Also, we don't know how Trump's legal troubles are going to affect people's willingness to vote for him. You know, there's people who are hardcore Trumpists, and there's people that may be, leaning strongly towards Trump, but seeing Trump engaged in trials over the attempts to overturn the 2020 election, seeing him being put on trial and people testifying against him, may shake up their confidence in him, or at least feel like, yeah, we need some kind of change of pace here. Maybe they'll find kind of attractive, who knows? So Trump's legal troubles, which I discussed in my last week's episode of Political Dharma, Trump's legal troubles is a wild card in this process. We don't know how it's going to affect voters' decisions. And on the Democratic Party side, Biden is the likely nominee of the party if he lives and maintains his health. There's deep concern among even loyal Democrats about Biden's age and about his and very low approval ratings across the board among the Democrats and the general public. So their enthusiasm for Biden is flagging. They're worried about his age. They're worried about how he's doing. They're worried about a matchup with Trump, all these things. And we don't know how they're going to break down either. Also, his approval ratings could go down even further because it looks like the U.S. is getting dragged. Well, maybe not even dragged. Maybe our administration is willingly getting us involved in what could be a major conflict in the Middle East. At the same time, we are funding the Ukraine government in its war against Russia. This is going to put a strain on the national budget. It's going to hit the news with a lot of very difficult political situations. Ukraine doesn't seem to be winning against Russia. And in the Middle East, I can guarantee that this thing could easily spiral out of control. We could get into a war, at least a proxy war with Iran, and it will not be easy to win, even with our seeming overwhelming military capacity. So if we get involved in another war, which it seems like we already are, approval ratings for the president may go down over time when people get sick of being at war and not seeing good progress or things spiraling out of control. So a lot of wild cards in this, which is to say that voter behavior in the upcoming year is going to be very unpredictable, and people may be willing to break with past behavior and past conventional behaviors and vote for a candidate like Kennedy, who can draw support from both sides and who is has a very familiar name, seems capable of raising lots of money. What he has to do, though, is show increasing support in the polls in order to convince people that he's a viable candidate, because people don't want to vote for somebody unless they feel like he's got a realistic chance. What I'm saying here is that so far, it doesn't look like he has a realistic chance, but this is Kennedy's opportunity to prove me wrong by showing his support growing, which would mean more and more voters would take him seriously, which means we could have an entirely different outcome than what I'm presenting. He could shake up the system entirely and say he does really well, but he still doesn't win, which my analysis would tend to predict. What about 2028? If he puts a dent in that system, another crack in the wall, maybe he can become president in 2028. So future is always uncertain. I'm not a prophet in the sense of being able to predict things. So that's it for today. That's my prognosis for Kennedy's campaign. I think things don't look real easy for him, but I'm glad he's running because at least it gives us a chance to try to put a crack in that wall. I do agree with him that government is very much beholden to corporations, and we're going down the wrong path. Don't want to stick with the status quo under Biden. Don't want to go to Trump. Leaves a lot of people like me hanging. Let's try something new. That's why I'm giving my support to him at this time. We'll see how things develop and if I change my mind. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your comments on some of my previous episodes. Remember to like this if you liked it and subscribe if you want to hear more from me. I generally drop these shows about once a week on Friday or Saturday. I really appreciate you listening and come again next week. All right. Bye.
I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus. The moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.